Welcome to the Vocation of the Business Leader podcast. I'm Greg Bostert. Here we explore how Catholic leaders let Christ and the teachings of the church he founded guide their work, integrating faith and business. Each episode offers inspiring stories to help you live an undivided life. Let's meet our guests. David Niccolini, founder and CEO of Hotel Shield. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Greg. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Will you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I grew up in the Midwest outside Detroit, Michigan. I uh, went to school down in the South, then went back to Michigan, and now find myself in the Mid-Atlantic. But that's kind of where it becomes interesting, because when I moved down to Maryland in about 2004, I had been always in sales and marketing, business development, some management work, and but post 9/11, in the Mid Atlantic in the DC area, I fell completely backwards into the U.S. defense contracting space. An opportunity that, in some ways, I didn't look for, and I never would have thought to look for, but it happened. And now I've spent 25 years in enterprise risk management. And enterprise risk management, the easiest way to think about it is all the things that an entity or an organization does to try to stay out of trouble. So think about regulations, compliance, laws, safety, security, all those type of things fall under enterprise risk management. I've been in that space for 25 years and was blessed in 2010 to be invited to become an entrepreneur and join a team as a co-founder. Started my that first company in 2010, and now here in 2025, I'm starting my eighth company, which is Hotel Shield. So yeah, that's a little bit of cradle Catholic. Someone who I don't really feel like I ever left the faith. I wasn't always religiously practicing, but I never left the faith. But then, interesting things happen. Like you get married and you have children, and all of a sudden you start seeing the world as a husband and a father, and that led me back deeper into the church, a process that really started in 2009 and has continued to this day. And yeah, very devout. I like to think of myself as a devout and practicing Catholic.
Okay, great. So, you have a business named Stat Crux. So tell us about that name and what do you do there?
Sure. So StatCrux is my personal LLC. It's actually a company that I own with my wife. It's something that I started several years ago as really just a platform. What wound up happening to me as a serial entrepreneur is that first I had one company, and then I had a second company, and then I had a third company. And what wound up happening was people would approach me about opportunities that didn't fit nicely in any of the entities that I was actively involved in. And for a time, I would just pass on those opportunities, and I'd say, "Oh well, here, let me introduce you to my friend over here. He might be able to help, or this friend, she might be able to help." And at some point, I started thinking to myself, I should create a platform, which ultimately became StatCrux, again owned with my wife, where I'm able to take those opportunities, kind of develop them, work on them, innovate around them, and see if it's something that I can help with. Ultimately, that's how it started. What StatCrux now is to me is a company that helps founders, startups, from basically zero in revenue to about 25 million. That's a space that I've had a lot of experience in, and as I like to tell my clients or my potential clients at StatCrux, from 0 to 25 million, I've probably made just about every mistake you can. And so by working with me as an advisor or consultant, hopefully I can help you avoid the mistakes I made, some of the pitfalls, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So in with your experience in enterprise risk management, what are some basic but commonly overlooked security things that businesses and personal and people can do to make themselves more secure?
The biggest problem that I found in security among non-professionals, and so there is a professional world out there. It's often in the private sector. It's also often filled by people that are called former, right? They're former law enforcement, they're former intelligence, they're former military, and so. But the major problem that I found out in the space with lay people is it's all just kind of mysterious black box. I don't understand it. And unfortunately, like any area of expertise, you can have expertise in engineering, you can have expertise in medicine, you can have expertise in law, you can have expertise in any area. I've always found that the people that I want to do business with are the people that understand that they have expertise and I don't, but I have a certain amount of intelligence. You should be able to explain it to me without jargon and without wrapping me around some axle and ultimately saying, well, David, you know what? Just leave it to the experts. And so security is one of those places where people don't understand, don't know what's available, don't know how much it costs. And that is the biggest mistake, that they treat it as something that is beyond them, above them, that they can't really understand, and so therefore they do nothing. And in my experience, what you want to do is you want to find, what I always tried to be, is a trusted advisor that can sit down with you, explain it in terms that a second grader could understand, and then put the power back in your hands to decide, what risk are you facing? What's the nature of the risk that you're facing or the threat? What is legit? What legitimately can be done about it? How can we reduce the threat ratio or the threat level, in a way that is not prohibitive or terribly expensive or what have you? So that's probably the over. No matter where I've been in family offices of high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals, corporations, senior executives, and even just my own family, that some or friends and family that have come to me sometimes with, hey, I've got this situation. What do you think? Oftentimes it is they're intimidated by the problem, they're intimidated by the risk, and they're intimidated by what they don't know. And the best thing is educate yourself. Like in anything else, educate yourself. If you have cancer and you go to see an oncologist, you get a second opinion. You educate yourself. You try to understand what it is they're talking about in terms of your treatment, your potential outcomes, your cost benefit ratio, all that.
Okay. So what if you don't know if you have a problem? As far as your security and just everyday life.
Sure. So I would say, a couple of things. One of the best, we're all endowed, to a certain amount with instinct, right? Gut feelings and instinct. And what I would tell anybody is, if you have an event that has happened, or if you had something that has transpired that has made, the hair on the back of your arm stand up, um, that's a time to start thinking about it and start doing something and start talking to somebody that could maybe help. Oh, and so then it's just a matter of. And the thing about it is, there's so many low cost, no cost solutions that are available. There are a lot of books out there, a lot of ways in which you can educate yourself and just kind of start, walking into that process. There's an old expression, I think it's an old joke or expression, but that says, you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than the person next to you. And there's a lot of truth of that in security, in that by putting up an alarm system and putting a sign out in front of your house that says you have an alarm system, well, all of a sudden you're a little bit faster than the person next to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So on LinkedIn, you wrote, since 2022, I've become a passionate anti-slavery advocate. So what happened in 2022 that lit that fire?
Sure. So I have to go back a little bit earlier than 2022. I actually have to go back to 2018 and bring God into the conversation. God's always part of everything, but but sometimes it's appropriate to name it and call it out. So 2018 was a pivotal year, but actually I'll go back a little bit farther, which was I spent my childhood as well as my years of education, as well as then my early professional life, and I spent that in kind of a what I grew up in the 80s, and as a child of the 70s and the 80s, there was separation of church and everything, right? So obviously, we all know the political separation of church and state that our founders talked about. But it was church and everything. Church was something private. It was something you did on your own. You didn't talk about it at work. You didn't talk about it in polite company, right? It was like separation, and that's the way that I was living my life. Luckily, that's not the way the Lord wanted me living my life. And the greatest story ever told is the love story that God has with each and every one of us. And He continued to knock on my heart and pursue me. And so by the grace of God, I started to realize, and 2028 was a pivotal year because in 2028, having been an entrepreneur for almost 8 years, and I was in search of, at the time, what I thought was a better business model, a better EBITDA, a better multiple on EBITDA for potential exits, right? I was looking for intellectual property and leaning into technology, and I had all these ideas about what I was seeking, what I was after. But God had a different plan, and ultimately, what happened in 2018 was I sat down with someone who's now my partner and wanting to go into business with him. And after a process of getting to know each other, going through some interviewing process, what have you, and ultimately becoming partners, he sat down with me and said, 3 months ago, before we started this whole thing, you said you wanted to go into business with me. Um, Here's the thing: God owns my business. So if you want to go into business with me, you have to be cool with that because I don't own my business. I'm a steward. God owns it. That started us in 2018 down a path that has been a blessing upon blessing upon blessing. Because what happened, again, I was in search of a better business model. The Lord said, no, I want to introduce you to this new partner. And through this new partner, He's going to introduce you to these investors. And these investors are going to introduce you to this entire ecosystem of kingdom minded entrepreneurs, technologists, and investors. And so I'm sorry for kind of going down that rabbit hole, which took me a little while, but it brings me back to how in the world did I get involved in counter trafficking or anti-slavery work? The investors that were behind that company, that partner and I that started working together in 2018, we raised capital from a venture capital firm in 2021. That venture capital firm is now based in Fort Worth, Texas, Zurich, and Singapore. They've always been kingdom-minded investors. When we went through the process and they gave us money in 2021, they not only wanted to know the return on investment, they also wanted to know what kind of impact we were going to make with the money that they were providing us. And what wound up happening was that group in 2022 started pushing into counter trafficking and anti-slavery. And they threw an event down in Fort Worth. Actually, it was in Dallas, Texas, in 2022. And I went, and they invited me as one of their portfolio company founders. And so they invited me down, and I went, and I got a full day on human trafficking. And so a few things happened. The first thing is my jaw hit the table. Because I started learning about something. Here I felt I was educated, informed, well read, and yet I knew none of this. And not only how it was happening, where it was happening, including in my backyard. I live on the East Coast now, but whether you're in Dallas or Washington, D.C., it's happening everywhere. But also the magnitude and the scope, the numbers, to realize that, learning about slavery in the history books, whether it's, the Israelites in Egypt or here in this country and our history of slavery, having learned about this, but then being told, but this is something of the past, it doesn't happen anymore. And then to learn that today in 2025, at that time 2022, but today in 2025, we believe that there are more human souls in some form of bondage than have ever been in the history of the world. Not by percentage, because we're now over 8-9 billion people on the planet. So the percentages are probably smaller, but the actual number of living souls, human souls living in hell, in a daily hell, is actually larger than it's ever been. So once I picked my jaw up off the table, went through some emotions, including kind of shame and guilt, but I quickly moved past that. And then it became, well, what are you going to do about it? And the Lord put it on my heart. I'm still not 100% sure what I'm supposed to do or how I'm supposed to do it, but every day I take another step towards what I think the Lord called me to, and no matter what, you know, my work in counter trafficking is not done until the Lord tells me.
So what was the business that you were working on in 2022?
Sure. So that business, which I'm still a shareholder and a board member of, is called Evidencity. At its root, Evidencity is a data and research company, and it has a certain technologies, including now over the last, I would say, year and a half, leaning heavily into AI to be able to pull unstructured data out of emerging and edge markets. So just very, very briefly, if you want to do a background check on me, or you want to do pull a corporate record on one of my companies here in the United States, and to a certain extent in the West, it's all digital. We have huge digital footprints. It's very easy to get broadband connection, not that much money. You hit the easy button and boom, you find out about David Niccolini. You find out about one of my companies. But if you put the person, say, in South Africa, or you put the company in Brazil, you hit the easy button and you don't get what you need. And so Evidencity was really created, and we raised money on the idea that there had to be a better model, a better scalable model to pull that type of information, that kind of unstructured offline data from emerging and edge markets that capital and business needs to make informed decisions. And so that was the idea of Evidencity. Now, when our investors started leaning heavily into counter trafficking work at Evidencity, what we realized was we have a real opportunity to help add transparency to the global supply chain. So if you think about, just take, and I'm not picking, well, just take a Fortune 10 company. That Fortune 10 company within their procurement system might have like 100,000 suppliers. So they have 100,000 vendors, subcontractors, suppliers that they work with, that they vet, and they put into their procurement system. And they're vetting them for all kinds of reasons. They don't want to participate in fraud. They don't want to participate in money laundering. There are all kinds of reasons why it's best practices to know your vendor. Okay. The problem is that those 100,000 vendors, how many vendors do they have? How many vendors do they have? And so what organized crime, different syndicates, and nefarious people all over the world understand, that one of the unintended consequences of the global economy is it's this dense, complex web of all of these different entities. And if you're smart, you can create, if you're smart and bad, you can create shell companies. You can basically siphon legitimate dollars off of you can siphon legitimate dollars off of the global economy for illegitimate purposes. And it could be narcotics, it could be money laundering, could be fraud, but it also could be human trafficking. Mm-hmm. So Evidencity, at the request of our investors, shifted our focus to global supply chain transparency so that we can try to root out forced labor, child labor, and indentured servitude out of the global economy.
Wow. So, Hotel Shield is your eighth endeavor. So how did you discern starting Hotel Shield?
Well, that's kind of a funny story. Last year in 2024, I actually started leaning very heavily into StatCrux, the personal LLC that I own with my wife, and really was focused exclusively on becoming a consultant and an advisor. Again, to startups and kind of the startups and founders in the 0 to 25 million range. That was my business plan. That was my model, and that's what I was going out and executing on. As I was doing that, um, the uh, uh, the investors behind Evidencity reached out to me and said, "We see you're consulting. Would you consider consulting with us?" And that led into a relationship with the venture capital firm that ultimately led to kind of two things. One, I became an entrepreneur in residence at Eagle Venture Fund, um, and and specifically focused on this idea that's come out of the counter trafficking space, that the hospitality vertical has a lot of touch points with human trafficking, and um, and based on some of the pain, litigation pain, as well as insurance premium pain that the hospitality vertical is in, that the time might be right to try to create a business model around fighting trafficking where we know it's happening within the hospitality vertical, where not a lot has been done for various reasons, and the community is reeling. The hospitality vertical is realizing that they need to do a lot more. So that was the consulting engagement to say, is there a business model here? Is it something we should look to invest in to, number one, fight trafficking, but number two, can we build a profitable business around it? And I should mention that, I'm part of a group of investors and technologists and founders and et cetera, that believe that we need to fight trafficking with for-profit business models.
Yeah.
That is not universally accepted in the space. There are some people that really have an issue with that. They believe that this should be the work of nonprofits and NGOs and law enforcement and governments. Um, and and if that is your opinion, I have no desire to try to change your opinion. My take, and the people that I work with, um, our thinking is that when you look at the statistics of human trafficking over the last 20 years, we are losing very badly.
Yeah.
Um, and something needs to change. And our belief is that we want to harness the power of capitalism, technology, and data, and we want to fight this in a new way. And some people are good with that, and some people aren't. I'm not here to change anybody's mind. I'm just letting you know where I align.
Yeah, it makes sense. Totally. Um, so, what has the reception with the hotel industry been for Hotel Shield?
Um, the reception has been overwhelmingly positive, um, which is why the consulting quickly turned into launching Hotel Shield and becoming the CEO of it. Um, and again, kind of a funny story, because one of my favorite expressions is, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. So I had my plans and the direction I was going in. The Lord had something else in mind, and so I'm trying to faithfully and obediently walk that path. But the response was so overwhelming and so positive that uh, it's really been staggering. Um, I will tell you that things have happened in the first 6 months of Hotel Shield, and again, this is my eighth time doing this, that have never happened to me before. Doors have been open, and relationships have been formed um, so quickly that I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I can think, I can think my first company that I started in 2010, and that I'm still a shareholder of, but I left the day-to-day operations in 2021 when we raised capital for Evidencity. And I can think about things that happened in like year 7, year 8, year 9. Seeds that were planted all the way back in 2010, 2011 that took years to germinate. And with Hotel Shield, it's like I plant a seed and things are sprouting up before I can even turn around. It's really been something.
So is this for any type of hotel, or is this, what is your market?
So that's a great question, and I will tell you what I thought, but I will also give you some outlier examples. So first of all, to understand the hospitality vertical, it's a fragmented space, and what I mean by that is that you and I might go to a hotel, and I'll just for explanation here, for no other reason, I'll just pick Marriott, right? So, I might stay at a Courtyard by Marriott. There's the Marriott name, that's the brand. Then someone owns that hotel, and then someone manages that hotel. And oftentimes the management company might outsource a lot of the functions, right? Like housekeeping might be an outsourced function. So in some cases, you can walk into a hotel and one entity is responsible across all four pieces, or it could be four different entities. You could have the brand, the owner, the operator, and then the subcontractors, right? So, but yet in certain marquee, like again, a JW Marriott might do the whole thing and say this is a marquee location and we own it, you know, A to Z. So the reason that I tell you all that is to say, you know, who is your prototypical client? My prototypical client is anyone in that food chain that is interested, that recognizes that this is a problem in the space and wants to do something about it. Okay, and so to me, um, I'm not so concerned about whether you are brand or owner or operator. What I care about is what's your heart posture around human trafficking, and are you ready to do something about it? And if that's the case, then I don't care where you are in that description. Secondarily to that, you might think, and a lot of people think this way. They think, first of all, they think hotel human trafficking, and the mind immediately goes to sex trafficking, and that's absolutely true. Um, but but hotels and motels are also used to transport forced labor, right? And actually, just as an interesting aside, people often think of large sporting events as places where, the Super Bowl or the World Series or the Olympics, and it's like, I'm sure sex trafficking spikes. And the fact of the matter is that it does a little bit, but not as much as people think, because the Super Bowl was just in New Orleans, right? There was sex trafficking going on before the Super Bowl and during the Super Bowl and after the Super Bowl. Actually, what's more interesting to a hotel in terms of human trafficking around something like the Super Bowl, or we have the FIFA World Cup coming up next year in North America, and then in 2028, Los Angeles has the Olympics. And in my first company, I actually worked for the IOC, worked several cycles of the Olympics, and so I'm well versed in this. What people don't think about is that, let's just take a Super Bowl for an example. 60,000 people are going to go to the game, right? An additional tens of thousands of people are going to come for all of the events around it, or to be in the city where the Super Bowl is happening, or what have you. The vast majority of people are not going to New Orleans to engage in sex trafficking, right? But all of them are going, they need hotel rooms. They want those rooms cleaned. They want the bathrooms cleaned. They want their food. They want to go to restaurants. So that environment actually has a surge need for service employees that might be forced labor, might be undocumented labor, might be paying underneath minimum wage, the indentured servitude, et cetera, et cetera. So actually, these large sporting events. So getting back to your other question, though, about who's the prototypical client, but it's kind of related to all of that I just spoke about, which was that our thinking was And most people's thinking is, well, this is probably not happening in your higher end hotels, right? It's probably your motels, the places by the interstate, right? The places, the economy places, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was kind of our focus and our idea going in, that we would focus on kind of those mid to lower end brands because that's more where it's happening. The really, and again, this is another example of something that I've never experienced before building a company. We were not 1 month in to launch, and I got contacted by a senior executive at a luxury brand who said, I've just read about Hotel Shield, and I'd like to talk to you about a pilot that we're working on in California. And this is, I'm not going to say the brand for confidentiality reasons, but this is a brand that if I were to tell you, you'd be like, really? Like this is at the highest end of luxury resorts and hotels. And this person is seeking me out to talk about human trafficking within his hotel properties, his resort and hotel properties. So um, that's a long-winded way of I guess saying to you, including the example of the large events, entertainment events, sporting events, what have you, is that we did all our research, and we went in with what we thought we were going to be doing within the hospitality vertical. And I have been pleasantly amazed and shocked and blessed in the doors that have opened and the people that have sought us out, saying this is a problem. I know it's a problem. We're not doing enough. I want to talk to you. How can you help? And how can I help you, like, break through the apathy of don't ask, don't tell.
Mhm.
So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah. So you had mentioned earlier about the hotel liability. So how does that play? The, what's the liability that the hotel is open to?
So about 15 years ago, the United States government at the federal level passed a law around human trafficking that basically extended the civil, not criminal, but the civil liability of human trafficking to third parties. And basically what it says was, even if you're not, what the law says, the US statute says, is that even if you aren't involved with actually trafficking human beings, right? Um, if you benefit from that activity, you are civilly liable. That law is about I think the first case was maybe about 15 years ago, um, and because in a hotel or motel situation, the hotel or motel is receiving money. They are receiving benefit when they swipe the card or take the cash and open up the room. Because if that human trafficking has been proven to have occurred in that property, in that room, and you benefited from it because you took your 89.99 or whatever for the room for the night, um, you are then liable. In the last 3 to 4 years, those lawsuits have exploded. The plaintiff lawyers have gotten very, very practiced at this. The settlements, the verdicts and the settlements are astronomical. No judge, no jury, when they hear about the living hell of human trafficking, really has much sympathy for the defendants. The courts have also, we talked before about the fragmented nature of owner operator management company. The courts thus far have not allowed any to leave. So oftentimes, the brand will say, hey, well, look, we don't own the property. We don't manage the property. Like, let us out of this lawsuit. And thus far, the courts have not allowed them to kind of point fingers. Everyone gets lumped in together. And so the cases have exploded. And your listeners can, just Google human trafficking hotels. And what they'll find is right now, actively, there are over 40 brands in current civil litigation brought on behalf of survivors of human trafficking that are working their way through their courts. And Google will also show you some of the big headlines and big payouts. And we're talking, 15 million, 17 million, $25 million payouts for one survivor. So that is part of the pain that the industry is feeling and dealing with, and that Hotel Shield is, and part of the reason why we're people are so interested in speaking to me as soon as they hear about the fact that we've started this.
Yeah. So you probably can't talk much about what is it a service, or is it like a software or
So absolutely, the elevator pitch, if you will. I didn't come on here to sell, but the
no, but yeah.
elevator pitch, as it were, is we want to take the best practices of data, readily available, commercially available data, um, the best of our tech stack. Basically, we built a tech stack through partners and licensing agreements to kind of bring it all together. With then where our Hotel Shield proprietary um, development really begins is pulling all of that together. So the data providers are out there. The data is commercially available, whether it's kind of like Google open source or dark web information. All that information is available out there. So we have those relationships. All of the different tech, the case management, the telemetry data, the adware data, all of the different um, uh, software solutions, including amazing advances in AI technology applied to cameras, existing cameras. I mean, it's just, all of that tech is there. But where Hotel Shield really, because those two things, and this is why I think Hotel Shield is gaining so much traction. If it was just the first two pieces, all we would be doing is showing the problem. It would go from, boy, I really think we have a problem, to, oh my Lord, here it is. We have a problem. The reason Hotel Shield, I think, we're not just coming with the problem, we're coming with the solution. And the solution is that, okay, great. You've detected potential human trafficking or any other illicit activity, right? Could be narcotics, could be domestic abuse falling into your hotel, could be a fight in your bar. There are all kinds of safety and security issues beyond trafficking where a hotel or a motel would want to know what's going on in real time to be able to respond to it. But then comes, well, how do you respond to it? And unfortunately, what most people do is they call 911. And which is when you think you might have human trafficking going on, believe me, a 911 dispatcher is not the person you want to talk to. If you're having a heart attack, if there's a robbery in progress, absolutely 911 will dispatch and hopefully get you a response in a timely fashion. But if you suspect, or I don't know, or I didn't like what I saw, I didn't like the way that he grabbed her and threw her into the room, I don't know what's going on, that 911 is not. So what we want to do is we want to create a response capability that gets the information basically wrapped up in such a way that law enforcement can act. Now, that action might just be a welfare check, right? It might just be like one squad car and a couple of police officers kind of knocking on a door and making sure, like, what's going on here, right? Or in some cases, some scenarios where it's like we have 3 known cartel members who just brought in 20 girls, and a lot of them look like they're under the age of 18. Well, that's called the cavalry, right? That's bring a SWAT team in. So and kind of everything in between. So that capability, the law enforcement response, knowing who to call, having a relationship with that jurisdiction, talking to the person who's actually trained in counter trafficking, right? And hopefully getting the response that you need. The other response is survivor care. One of the pieces that a lot of people don't like to talk about with human trafficking, because quite honestly, because it's overwhelming, and it's really really hard to deal with. But the largest cost associated with human trafficking, people like to focus on, let's get the bad guys and throw them in jail, and let's rescue, the survivors. Those survivors are, once they're quote unquote rescued, um, are starting a path that is going to be years of getting over trauma and abuse. The recidivism in sex trafficking in the United States is somewhere in the range of 80 to 90%. So even when the bad guy is, the pimp is arrested and thrown in jail, and the survivor is sent to maybe the ER, maybe they talk to a social worker, maybe they don't, and then they're released after hours. If they're not busted for prostitution, right, which is another problem. Um, when they walk out of the ER, or they get busted for prostitution and they walk out of, they get paroled or bail and walk out, one of two things usually happens. Either someone's there to force them right. They are so broken, they don't know anything else. So
Yeah.
they willingly go back, because at least that's a life they know. At least that's a place where they get their meals, or maybe they're addicted to some sort of substance so they can get their fix, right? So recidivism in sex trafficking in the United States is 80 to 90%. So we don't just want to, knock down doors and arrest the bad guys and throw them in jail and make sure that the law enforcement has everything they need to hand to the DA for prosecution. We do want to do that, but we also want to connect the survivors to get them on a path to full healing and redemption, which unfortunately is very expensive and takes a long time. But there's so many wonderful nonprofits and so many wonderful NGOs that are basically out there waiting to receive those people and try to walk them to a path to full healing and full redemption. So that's one of the reasons I think we've gotten, if we were just coming with, hey, we can tell you when trafficking's happening like that, and then clients would say, well, then what do I do with it?
Yeah.
And so we're trying to, so Hotel Shield is everything from prevention, detection, response, A to Z, turnkey solution. No hotel brand or owner or operator is in the business of counter trafficking. They're in the business of hospitality. They're in the business of selling rooms, right? We're in the business of counter trafficking. Outsource that to us and let us do it for you.
Yeah. Wow. Um, are you experiencing some spiritual warfare?
Yes. Boy, I wasn't expecting that question, but yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you're disrupting the the darkness,
Yes.
and that has to be,
Um,
because that's real.
so one of the blessings of all of this is, for me personally, is that the Lord has cracked open Scripture in a way to me uh, that I've never been able to see or have before. And what do I want to say? And that's been a real blessing. But what I'm thinking of is Paul, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the chapter or verse. Paul talks about um, Paul talks about an affliction, and he refers to it as like a thorn in his side. Um, and he's basically trying to teach, other disciples and other members of the early church, and even teaching us to this day. But he talks about the fact that for many times, at least twice, I think he says, he begged the Lord to take it away from him. He doesn't tell us what it is. Is it a temptation? Is it a sin? Is it like, what is it? But he's begged the Lord to take it away from him. The Lord hasn't. And what he's come to realize is that it's actually a gift, because it's a constant reminder of Paul's dependence on the Lord, and a constant reminder of the Lord's goodness and the Lord's promise to us. And that actually what he thought was an affliction is actually a blessing. So wasn't prepared for that question. The short answer is yes. What I have, and I guess the what surprised me was not so much that it's come after me, but I truly believe it's come after my family a little bit. And so yeah, I've been my spiritual director actually. There are certain prayers um, uh, of exorcism for lay people. Um, I'm not, I don't want your readers to go off and Google prayers for like if you're going to look for prayers for exorcism, make sure that as a lay person that you are only trying to take on the authority. But I have certain authorities as a father, as the head of my household, and so with the help of my spiritual director, I've definitely said a lot of new prayers.
Yeah, yeah. You have a lot of authority. Wow. Just so, what do you want your legacy to be?
I'm not quite sure. I It's a big question. Um, I let me tell you what I let me tell you what I'd love to believe I want my legacy to be, and that I'm working towards. Um, I don't want to seem sanctimonious, or so I want anybody who listens to this to know that I'm not saying this is what I want my legacy to be. It's what I want myself to want my legacy to be, and that is just reflecting Christ. Like that's it. I'm not a character in this story. Story's already been written, and the characters have already you know, Christ is a character in the story. Mary is a character in the story. David Niccolini is not a character in the story. My hope and my prayer is that I will live a life that reflects Christ, and after that, doesn't matter. I'm not saying that's where I am.
Oh
I
yeah.
I still have an ego, but it's really where I pray I can get to before all is said and done.
What advice would you give to a business professional that is having a hard time living a undivided life?
We mentioned before we started recording that I actually just started a new role, Scent Ventures, who I'm sure your listeners will know about, but a great Catholic ecosystem founded by John Cannon, and I just recently became a coach and kicked off a new fellowship for Scent, and and boy, this is a huge question and a really important question. And we've only had two sessions, and the question has already come up. Um, and I would go back to where I started this conversation about separation of church and fill in the blank, right? Separation of church and my social life, separation of church and my business. Take down that wall, dismantle it any way you can. It is not the way in which God intended any of us to live. Um, my pastor gave a homily, and I just it's always stuck with me. It's probably a couple of years ago now at this point. In one of these gospels where Jesus is bringing sight to a blind man, he picks up clay and dirt, and he spits on it, and he makes it into kind of a lather, and he actually rubs it on the eyes, and you think to yourself, like, Lord, why? Like, you're the Lord, you're the God of the universe and creation. You don't even have to snap your fingers. Why make a mess and rub it? And my pastor's homily and his reading of this, and what the Lord put on his heart was, the Lord wants into our mess. He wants into every aspect of our life. Our mistake is thinking that our sin or our mess or our parts of ourself that we don't even like to admit to ourselves, let alone someone else. We make the mistake of thinking that his mercy and love and grace is not large enough to deal with that. And father my pastor father was saying, like, he wants into the mess. So if whatever reason you've erected that wall, right? As I think back on my life and why I erected the wall, I don't think it was malicious or really even conscious. I I just think I grew up in a time where that's what you did. So when I became an entrepreneur, I said, "Well, yes, of course I'm Catholic and I'm religious and I go to church, but like that has nothing to do with my business." And so whatever reason that wall got set up in your life, start dismantling it, start tearing it down. And when you let the Lord in, I'm not going to sit here and give you or your readers a false gospel of the prosperity gospel. Like that's not our Lord, and I have
Right.
no idea what the Lord has in store for you. But what I can tell you is that when you let the Lord in, he will do for you what you need, right? And you keeping him out is, you might think, "Oh, well, I'm going to keep the Lord out of this because like look how good things are going." Right? But believe me, that's not what he wants for you. He wants you to be with him, and whatever might come comes. And there'll be highs and there'll be lows, but you'll be with him. And that's a much better way to live.
Yeah. So, where can people go to learn more about what you're doing at Hotel Shield and anywhere else?
Sure. If anybody's interested, I mean, I'm pretty transparent and open on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn, David Niccolini. At Crux is my personal LLC. You can contact me through that. You know, I have so many email addresses. Luckily, with technology, they all come to the same place. Evidencity, Torchstone is the security company, Hotel Shield. But yeah, anybody interested, happy to talk. And I love. I'll just close on this. When I first became an entrepreneur, um, it became very lonely and very isolating. I was surrounded by family, but I felt alone. I was surrounded by partners, but I felt alone. Um, um, I love working with founders and entrepreneurs, um, to kind of get them out of that isolation. And so anybody who's thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, is an entrepreneur, or what have you, feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk to you, um, and at least have a conversation. But yeah, just make that offer to your listeners.
Great. Awesome. And I'll put all that in the show notes. Um, is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you want to talk about?
No, I think we covered a lot. I hope it was an hour well spent. I hope anybody who listens to it finds something of value, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us today's episode of the Vocation Business Leader Podcast. We hope you found inspiration as we explore the powerful union of faith and business. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, share it, leave a review. Until next time, may God guide your work. God bless.
God bless.